Did you see that Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has a new tool to use? Yeah, it's called the 25th Amendment. She envisions wielding the 25th Amendment to strike down the president by getting him deemed incompetent by a bipartisan commission. Today we'll talk about how Speaker Pelosi should be yielding to the Constitution instead of remaking it into a weapon. We'll discuss that in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to restore American liberty and independence. Last Friday, Speaker Pelosi and Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin introduced a bill that would, according to Fox News, create a commission that would allow Congress to oust a president from office using the 25th Amendment, a day after she accused President Trump of being in an altered state from his coronavirus treatment. Well, according to a joint press release by both Pelosi and Raskin, the legislation, which is modeled on a bill introduced by Representative Raskin in 2017, will enable Congress to ensure effective and uninterrupted leadership in the highest office in the executive branch of government by creating the body and process called for in Section 4 of the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The release also stated, in emergency situations, Congress could pass a concurrent resolution requiring the Commission to examine the President, determine his/her ability to execute the powers and duties of the office, and report its findings to Congress. If presidential incapacity exists, the Vice President would immediately assume the role of acting president. Raskin is quoted in the release as having said, "The 25th Amendment was adopted 50 years ago, but Congress has never set up the body it calls for to determine presidential fitness in the event of physical or psychological incapacity. Now is the time to do it." And isn't it interesting that Congress suddenly found this new power to take advantage of, yet when it comes to their area of responsibilities in Article 1, Section 8, they go beyond the limitations listed there. The founders and subsequent sessions of Congress have worked out the succession details of the President and Vice President when those details have been needed. The Congressional Research Service charted the milestones in the journey to solidify the succession process in a 26-page report published March 22, 2007. Spanning nearly 200 years, it covers constitutional provisions and legislation from 1787 to 1967. Starting in 1787, Article 2 of the Constitution covers the executive branch. Its 6th clause originally stated, in case of the removal of the President from office or of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of the said office, the same shall devolve on the Vice President, and the Congress may, by law, provide for the case of removal, death, resignation, or inability, both of the President and Vice President, declaring what officers shall then act as President, and such officers shall act accordingly, until the disability be removed or a President shall be elected. Now, this has stood until the 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967, which provided more detail regarding the succession process. Section 1 retained the idea of the Vice President becoming President upon the President's death or resignation. Section 2 highlights the President nominating a Vice President in case of a vacancy, followed by confirmation by a majority of both the House and Senate. Section 3 details a process for the President to follow in the case he feels he cannot discharge his duties, which transfers his power to the Vice President as acting President. Section 4, which is where Pelosi has been focusing most of her succession ideas, states the following in the first clause. Whenever the Vice President and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting President. But notice what Pelosi and Raskin are suggesting here. The 25th Amendment already states that if the Vice President and a majority of the cabinet officers determine the President cannot do his job, then the Vice President becomes acting President upon sending a letter to the President pro tempore of the Senate. The next clause basically states that once the disability is cleared up, then the president must submit a letter declaring so. And with the support of the acting president and a majority of cabinet officers, he and the vice president can then resume their duties. If the vice president and majority of the officers disagree with the president's assessment, then Congress steps in to decide if the president will be able to do his job or if the acting president is to continue. But it needs 2/3 of Congress to do so. Instead of allowing the vice president and the cabinet to do their job, Pelosi and Raskin have seized upon the phrase, or of such other body as Congress may, by law, provide, meaning that the vice president and the other body would work together instead of the cabinet. But again, what they're doing may be rather insidious. Remember the press release, which stated, in emergency situations, Congress could pass a concurrent resolution requiring the commission to examine the president, determine his/her ability to execute the powers and duties of the office, and report his findings to Congress. If presidential incapacity exists, the vice president would immediately assume the role of acting president. According to the proposed legislation, the members of this commission would include physicians and psychiatrists and cannot be elected officials, federal employees, or a member of the armed forces, basically making the commission unaccountable to voters. Another troubling aspect is the in emergency situations phrase. Well, who determines this? Far-left politicians have suggested that climate change is a reason to legitimately lock down and radically change our economy to combat the idiotic notion that we can control the climate. They look at this as some sort of emergency situation. Also, what happens when a president doesn't agree with climate change? Or perhaps he only believes that there's male and female genders, or doesn't believe in the LGBTQ agenda, or believes in pro-life issues. Could the psychiatrists on the commission use this to deem him unfit for office? And if the commission can do this to the president, can it do so to the vice president as acting president, which would then allow the Speaker of the House to step in? There are way too many opportunities here for big government advocates to take away your representation. Whether or not this tweaking is unconstitutional is up for debate. But even if it would be constitutional, it would be wise to keep the current process without any further involvement from either this Congress or future sessions of Congress. Use our legislative action alert at jbs.org to tell Congress and President Trump to say no to Pelosi's 25th Amendment scheme. For in-depth study of the Constitution, the John Birch Society offers the 6 DVD set, The Constitution is the Solution. Host Robert Brown takes you step by step through the Constitution. This is perfect for individual study or even for group presentations. Direct links are in the video description. And this is one of the many tools we offer to help inform concerned Americans of the system of government that our founders gave us and the active role they expected us to take in order to safeguard liberty, freedom, and independence. So who do you know that cares about freedom and independence? Because folks, it's time to act. The survival of our republic hinges on what you do or don't do. I'm Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society, and until next time, stay informed, stay active, and stay safe, Patriots.